Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I am your host, Leon Wolf, and we are delighted that you've decided to join us. Today is Thursday, September the 10th, and appreciate all 5 of you who are here during the halftime show of the initial NFL broadcast of the year. Thank you very much for taking your time to be with us tonight. We have a diminished regular panel tonight. Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk and F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon, sporting an awesome hat, are with us as always. But filling in for Scott Lincicome, we have Vincent Coglianese of the Daily Caller, and we have communication strategist Ryan Moy. You may know him on Twitter as always on offense, and we are delighted that both of them have decided to join us tonight. We're hopeful to be joined at some point by Caleb Howe, but if not, we'll proceed onward with the panel that we have. Let's get right into the news of the day. It is the time of the year where everyone is talking about the primaries, so let's get right into the 2016 news, and our first question is going to go to Vincent. So, as you may know, Vincent, the primary has essentially turned into mostly a two-man campaign at this point. It's really Donald Trump and Ben Carson and everyone else. Everyone else has fallen into a pack, including Jeb Bush, Scott Walker. Everybody else is kind of in the 5 to 9% range, and Carson and Trump are pulling away from the pack. Everybody's been kind of wondering when Carson and Trump are going to go head-to-head, and Carson had kind of the first swing at Trump out of the gate, essentially taking aim at Trump's immigration position. And he said specifically that Trump's plan to deport all 11 million illegals is not practical, and so on and so forth. And Trump, of course, had his kind of characteristic rejoinder that he had. The question that I have for you, Vincent, is this a smart play by Ben Carson? And, of course, I wrote a post on Red State a couple of days ago. Really, it's assumed that taking this kind of position is a death knell in a Republican primary, but really that might not be the case. There are actually more Republicans than you would think who favor some sort of path to legal status, even if they don't favor a path to citizenship. So what do you think about what Carson is doing, positioning himself, I guess, a little bit more moderately on immigration when everyone else has more or less tacked to the right on immigration in response to the Donald?
I suspect that if you have a moderate position on immigration, then the intensity with which you care about immigration as the issue you're going to vote for is probably a lot less, right? So Ben Carson's not being supported because of his immigration position. I think Donald Trump, meanwhile, is this guy. This is a guy who's like super strong on immigration in terms of like wanting to like deport all these people, but at the same time has like these like gaps in his immigration policy, including he wants to build a big glorious door with Donald Trump written across it and allow all sorts of people into the country. It's not entirely coherent. It's definitely populist. There's definitely a lot of allusions to trying to deport everyone. But again, I think when it comes to voter intensity specifically, Republicans who care about immigration are the types of people that vote, at least, as a number one issue, are the types of people who want to just throw all of the bums out.
So, Ryan, let's go to you next. And kind of riffing off of that, definitely it is true that a lot of the people who have the bigger microphones in the movement, you know, the Laura Ingrams and the Ann Coulters and the people who are on TV and on the radio a lot, are very opposed to illegal immigration, and they say so loudly and with great force. But then again, when you look at what Republican voters consider to be their top issue, time and time again, they say things like the economy, they say things like foreign policy. Immigration consistently ranks, 10 to 15% of the Republican electorate. So, I mean, I guess my question is, if you look at the experience of 2008, when George W. Bush, who ran on a path to citizenship, 2008, John McCain authored more than one quote-unquote amnesty bill, got the nomination in 2008. Is this electorate essentially different? I mean, should we assume that someone who runs on that platform can't run in 2016 and win, whereas they could in 2008 and 2000?
Well, I don't think that Ben Carson has fully laid out his position, but what I do think resonates with probably a lot of us is that he's calling into question, it's not Trump's proposal, it's how are you going to do it? Doesn't this equal more big government? Doesn't this equal more intrusion? Are we going to have to see Elian Gonzalez-style raids to implement a deportation plan? What does it look like to send, an American citizen along with his illegal immigrant parents abroad and then try to figure out who's coming back? So I think in that sense, he has raised some of those concerns. I don't think it's going to hurt him right now because Ben Carson has quite a lot of goodwill in the party. But I do think, that might be an area where Trump will try to go back later if he feels like Carson's catching on a little too much. But I mean, right now, Trump's still pretty much ahead of him in most polls that I've seen.
So Caleb, what do you think? Is there room, and welcome to the program, Caleb, is there room for somebody in a Republican presidential primary who actively stakes out kind of a centrist position on immigration? And I'm not entirely sure that's what Ben Carson is doing, but somebody who says, listen, I openly favor a path to citizenship. I think that all this rhetoric that Trump has been throwing out there is nuts, and I want to be the guy who's on the other side of that issue. Is there room for that kind of a candidate to actually pick up support on the basis of that instead of losing?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you guys handled the muting and unmuting. I guess I'll do my own tech. I think it's kind of a silly question. I guess it's kind of a silly question to me. Is there room for blank in the Republican field, or is there room for blank in the Republican debate, when we know that we've already got Trump in here in the first place? There's room for anything right now. If Big Bird wants to run, I think there's room for him in the debate, and he can easily get on the second stage.
All right. Well, let's go to Bill.
Well, I was waiting for you to respond to me. I mean, I can just.
No. I mean,
if you want.
I mean, let's set aside the Trump
That's how these
phenomenon,
radio
which I
shows
think
work.
that we
I don't know if you've
understand.
done this before.
Yeah, right, sure. I mean, well, Trump is a sui generis candidate, right? I mean, we assume that he's a one-of-a-kind thing, and that everyone else kind of has their, makes their play based on issues and personality and things of that nature, instead of just being Trump. So apart from Trump, is there some guy who can come in and say and gain ground based on that
if there's
issue?
some particular guy, then yeah, of course there is some particular guy, and I think Rubio could do it if he wanted to, even after the hate that he's received. If you're asking instead the question that you asked, which is there room for someone to do that? Again, I just have to say there's room for anyone to do anything this year. Anything at all is something that can be done this year in the Republican field. There's 42 candidates. They represent every possible point of view. Some of them are not from America. Ted Cruz. So
Ted Cruz birtherism has made its appearance on
I
VATF.
think there's room for anything. But
So
obviously there are voters out there who are interested in a centrist platform on immigration. And if anything, he's made more room for it, because there's a natural tendency of conservatives to reject something that's extremely popular or part of the zeitgeist. So his riling up the rabid anti-immigration base is going to have an equal effect, maybe not an equal effect, but it's going to have an effect on people who feel the opposite way, who are going to go more, that were previously like, well, let's be reasonable about immigration, and now they hear him being unreasonable, and they're like, okay, fine, open borders.
All right, Jeff, well, let's go to you. What do you think? Can Ben Carson, on the other hand, be that guy? You know, Carson's appeal is pretty much exclusively to the evangelical right. I mean, are these folks that he already has in his camp going to flee his camp when hearing this kind of remark, or is this a crowd that he can actually increase his support with?
Well, I don't know if I would agree with the premise of what you just said there. You say that Carson's appeal is exclusively to the evangelical right now. He certainly does draw heavily upon that for his source of strength. But I think in a GOP primary that at this early stage, and I got to emphasize that it is still, it's September of 2015, for God's sake. Okay, so it's early. But at this early stage, Carson's appeal is not just to evangelicals, it's to people who are tired of, the establishment candidates, the professional politicians. They want an outsider candidate, but they want a guy who seems likable and accomplished, but is also not a blustering, fuckface von clown stick that Donald Trump is. And so Carson, by being a soft-spoken yet manifestly intelligent and competent person, despite lacking his experience, he really is making bank on that. I have no idea whether people are going to respond to his immigration status the way that the pundits suggest they are. My thinking, however, is that they won't, for the same reason that people aren't abandoning Trump for his various hypocrisies, flip-flops, or deviations from conservative norms. The voters seem to, at this point in this race, care a lot less about whether you're a true blue doctrinaire down the line conservative than whether you're a real guy, an outsider, somebody who isn't captured by Washington, D.C. interests. Carson still has that. And the fact that he's willing to kind of run counter to the populist rhetoric of Trump, even make someone like me, who's kind of quintessential kind of rhino insider, perspective kind of a guy, step back and respect him. I still don't think he's qualified for this race. He's obviously he's the world's greatest pediatric neurosurgeon, right? But he's not a presidential candidate to me, seriously. But I just respect him more and more with everything that he says and the way he handles himself. And I think the voters are going to think that as well. It's going to really be interesting to see what happens in the debate.
So, Bill, one of the things that you have to give credit to Trump for doing is for thoroughly dominating the trolling war with Jeb Bush. I mean, he has owned this thing from the first quarter through the fourth, buzzer to buzzer. He has absolutely dominated and trolled Bush successfully from the start of this campaign to the present moment. Other candidates in the Republican field have attempted to return fire on Trump without much success. Bobby Jindal took his turn today, both in his speech and also on Twitter. How do you rate Bobby Jindal's efforts so far to counter troll the Trump campaign?
I think Bobby Jindal has done some Biff Diddle level trolling right now. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being Jeb Bush, 10 being Biff Diddle, I give this about a 7.5. I give it a Sunny Bunch. So that's my take on the trolling efforts. But the fact that it was a sustained campaign, starting in the AM at the National Press Club and ending on like 3 different Fox shows, Jindal has kind of realized that if the GOP, Jindal's campaign, he kind of started off, he was like, oh, the GOP wants an answer to how we're going to replace Obamacare. And then he realized that nothing matters and the GOP wants a good insult comic. And he's giving the people what they want. So if the GOP is going to keep going in this direction, I say Bobby Jindal should carry the torch. And it seems like this is the Al Smith primary, where no one's running to win the general election. Everyone's running to win the Al Smith dinner that happens 2 weeks before the election. That being the Catholic Church's roast in New York City between both political candidates. So yeah, I think Jindal stepped up to the plate today. I expect him to get no bounce in the polls, but he's captured my heart and mind. As far as Trump's total trolling, I think Trump's poll numbers speak for themselves about how effective trolling is in modern America, because nothing matters. We talk about Carson as the leading evangelical candidate. He's actually losing evangelicals by 4 points in Iowa to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the thrice married casino entrepreneur, is leading evangelicals right now because humanity is doomed.
Bill, I got to jump in here for a second. First of all, I want to tell you, get Biff Diddle to unblock me. I talked about how I like the Grateful Dead, and he blocked me, and I'm really upset about that. But more importantly, Bobby Jindal punching up at Donald Trump today. He's desperate because he's under 1%, so he's really got no better options, right? He can't just wait it out like a guy like Rubio or Bush can. But it's not going to work for the same reason that Scott Walker or even Rick Perry, who I like, punching up on Donald Trump hasn't worked. You never look good if it looks like the reason for your candidacy or the guiding principle of your candidacy is following somebody else's lead. The guys who have done the best so far are like Fiorina, Carson, even Rubio, who's down in the polls, who are just doing their own thing and not acting as if everything that they do is a response to Donald Trump. Ignore him. That is your best bet.
Well, let me go to
the thing about Carson today. I think whoever advised Carson to take a shot at Trump advised him poorly and should be fired.
Well, we're going to talk about that because
I think God told Ben Carson to take a shot at Donald Trump.
Well, hold on. We're going to come back around to Carson and that shot at Trump, which he then retracted. But let me go to Vincent with a question about following up on what Jeff just said. I mean, listen, I understand what Jeff's point is that you don't want people to get the impression that your campaign is to be about one guy. But listen, I mean, isn't there an argument that Jindal is more kind of nimble-footed and suited to the game of playing troll with Donald Trump than either Lindsey Graham or Rick Perry were for whatever, and we all like Rick Perry on this particular program, but in terms of playing this game of being funny and openly challenging a guy and doing things like Jindal did on Twitter today, I mean, he's less susceptible, I think, to the barbs of the Donald and more able to respond in kind to what the Donald is doing. I mean, would you agree with Jeff that it's a bad move for Jindal to do it, or do you think that it might be something that could help him?
I don't think it's a bad move for Jindal. This is a Hail Mary. I mean, Jindal needs anything he can get. This is the only way is up right now. In Jindal's case, I think he is probably one of the more adept politicians in the sense that he's probably smarter than the rest of the field, for one. And you know, you look at in terms of like going after Donald Trump. Yeah, he could succeed. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of evidence, by the way. The Donald keeps saying this, that every time somebody attacks me, they go down in the polls. Well, yeah, it's not causation though. It's not attacking Donald Trump doesn't result in you dropping in the polls. But I will say this about Trump. Until Trump got into the race, you remember what the field looked like, how split it was, and you had Jeb sort of like in the front, but there was not any sense of fandom. You didn't have like Republicans. I mean, you guys all deal with these conservative websites, et cetera. You see how the commenters reacted. Until Donald Trump stepped into the arena, you didn't have this like infectious fandom where people decided, I don't care what he says, I'm going to back it. And now you're seeing that. This is like the same impulse in the United States, by the way, that leads to people thinking that the Patriots didn't do anything wrong. I mean, it's like, there's no way. It's like once you're a fan, you're committed, you're wedded, and there's nothing that can get in your way. And that's what's happening with Donald Trump.
All right, so let's go to Ryan, and I want to talk a little bit about Scott Walker's speech. I believe it was yesterday at Eureka College, which of course is Ronald Reagan's alma mater. And Scott Walker is essentially attempting to press the reset button on his campaign. Said that, you know, he's going to go to D.C. and clean out the fever swamps and so on and so forth. Look, Scott Walker, I think, has a credible claim to being a D.C. outsider and a great story to tell. But the problem I think that I have with Scott Walker is that he can't, for whatever reason, ever since he stepped into the presidential campaign as opposed to his own campaign, he can't be comfortable in his skin. He can't stake out a firm position and stick with it. Is that something that Scott Walker is ever going to regain? Are we ever going to see that guy that we all knew and loved who took a position and stuck with it and fought through it to the end? Or have we basically seen a new wishy-washy guy who's going to end up, you know, falling to the back of the pack like he's continuing to do?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, but I was actually a huge Walker fan at the beginning of this process, thinking that, you know, while he does have credentials that would appeal to Tea Party and more conservative voters, he's also got a manner about him that's appealing, kind of non-threatening to the so-called establishment. So in that sense, it was great to see him in the race and seeing a conservative governor who can tout reforms that have worked for his state. But, and I think I read this on Red State, someone linked it to me yesterday, but it just kind of went down all of his senior staff, and it's you know, it's like an RNC reunion with some of his staffers, and I can't tell if he's listening to bad advice or if he's ignoring good advice, but I'm pretty sure it's the former. I mean, he goes out there and he's had as many campaign relaunches as Hillary at this point, and I feel like, you know what works well for you. The budget, taxes, pro-life, unions, those issues. But then he wanders into foreign policy and immigration without a coherent message. And then his aides have to issue multiple statements clarifying. And then by the time you're thinking, is he trying to get to the right of Trump, or is he apologizing for getting to the right of Trump? It just, it's disheartening. I think he has maybe one chance to really get back to the fundamentals and redefine himself, but at this point it's like he's been disappointing to a lot of us who are rooting for his candidacy.
If I may jump in really quick, I actually kind of like the Walker approach because gaffes have killed the GOP in recent years. And what's nice about Scott Walker's approach is that you can't stick your foot in your mouth if you're too busy staring at it the entire time while you're giving speeches and having debates and stuff. So, yeah, I think Walker's whole approach of, you know, be silent, change your positions, stutter all the time when someone asks you a question, I think that's really going to help us, you know, because autism rates are going up. So, and those guys vote too. So, you know, this guy's the future of the GOP, and I just have to, like, Scott Walker's the guy who spends 23 hours designing the perfect resume, and then when he goes up to the interview, he forgets to put on pants. You know, that's kind of how his entire campaign is coming off. And I think,
ladies and gentlemen, we forgot to mention, and it should have been obvious based upon the hat that he's wearing, but Bill McMorris is doing his Donald Trump impersonation throughout the entire show tonight. So whatever you hear Bill say, he's trying his best to sound and look exactly like Donald Trump. We have Bill on tonight. He is what Donald Trump would say if he were on BATF. That's his purpose on tonight's show. So
Donald Trump, if he went to a school as good as Cornell, you know.
Exactly right. So let's go to Caleb.
Hey, Cornell is where people commit suicide. I just want to point that out. It's not even a real school.
Thank you for that random comment, Jeff.
On the wrong day, too. It's National Suicide Awareness Day.
Well, Jeff just made us all aware.
That's what you call a Republican gap.
All I'm saying is, all you people, consider your options. Maybe the way out is the right answer. That's all. If you go to Cornell, it probably is. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, so
they rejected me at law school. I've never gotten over it.
I didn't think that Cornell even had a law school. But moving on to Caleb, Carson. So we talked a little bit about his kind of jab at Trump, but he had actually another direct jab at Trump earlier this week, basically questioning Trump's religion. And he said essentially, look, I draw my support, from evangelicals because I'm a guy who, allows God and the Bible to lead his life, and I think that's a key difference between me and Trump. Trump fired back in his kind of characteristic, fashion. I'm more religious than anybody else. I'm more pro-Jesus than God himself, in the way that Trump does. And Carson essentially responded to all that by essentially issuing an apology. Now, I mean, not really an apology, but saying, look, I don't want to get into this with Trump. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have questioned his faith. I want to talk about what I want to talk about. Is this a fight that Carson can disengage from now that he's kind of provoked Donald Trump, or do you think that he's going to be pulled into this kind of back and forth with Trump that other people have in the past?
If you're asking me to predict the actions of an infected dog, I can't possibly do that. I think it's possible he can try to get out of a fight with Trump. Who knows what Trump's going to do? He's got his teeth in something. He's probably going to chew on it for a while.
Do you think it's a good move for Carson? Do you think it's a good move for Carson to essentially?
It's a terrible move for Carson to.
No, for whatever you think about his initial reaction to punch at Donald Trump, do you think it's the right thing to do for him to apologize and say essentially I didn't mean to say that, or should he have stuck with it once he said it?
Yeah, it's defensible because he's talking about religion. It's a defensible apology to say I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have questioned somebody's faith. People have said that 1,000 times about 1,000 politicians. It's a pretty standard answer. Maybe I shouldn't have said so and so isn't religious. I don't know what's in their heart. I think that's a pretty easy thing to get away with.
So about that, with respect to Trump in particular, we've had the kind of the fracas that was started a couple of weeks ago when he was asked essentially what his favorite Bible verse was, and he refused to say what it was, and Sarah Palin says, "Oh my gosh, that's a private thing." I mean, look, I don't think that the questions that Donald Trump has been asked have been intensely private. I mean, about religion. I mean, isn't kind of the point of a religion that you should be able to talk about what it is that you believe and why? I mean, isn't that, without getting into the details of anything intimate or private, isn't that kind of
just ending up arguing? You're arguing past the people who are on his side because they're saying it's a bullshit question. They shouldn't have asked it in the first place. And you're saying, well, if he likes his religion, he should be able to talk about it. Neither one of you is going to come to a resolution that way. The question is, he was asked it. And once he's asked it, how did he deal with it? How did he deal with it is the real answer. The problem that Trump has is that he is terrible at dealing with things when they don't go his way. That's why he lashes out at Megyn Kelly. His fans, sometimes they indulge it, sometimes they're fans of it, sometimes they're just turning a blind eye to it because they've committed, as was mentioned earlier, I think, by Ryan.
So let's go next to Jeff, and we may go around the horn on this one. Ted Cruz, who's a guy that I've kind of defended from Neal's many barbs over the course of the months on this show, has essentially, there's no essentially to it. I mean, he's flat out said, I'm following Donald Trump around because wherever he goes, cameras are also there. And I think that his ploy is essentially to try to siphon off some of Trump's support. Does he risk losing some of his own support in being so closely associated with Trump during the course of this campaign?
I don't. That's a great question, but I don't actually know the answer to it. I don't know how much support Cruz really has unto himself. You look at all the polls. Trump's up there at 25, 30%. Cruz is down there in fourth place, third place at like 9, 8, 4, 5%, depending on the poll, which suggests to me that whatever support he has is just a mere echo of what the real thing is. I don't know. Cruz is clearly making the assumption that whenever, if ever, Trump's support collapses, that it will all naturally migrate to him. But and this is the argument that Neal doing, our regular panel member who's on sabbatical right now, would make the argument is that that's an unsafe assumption, for the simple reason that Ted Cruz doesn't have the charisma that Donald Trump has. Ted Cruz is an oleaginous, dishonest, grifting fuck, and I'm speaking politely here. So he's not going to be able to pick up the same number of people who gravitate towards Trump that someone otherwise might, particularly because Trump, and this is the biggest fallacy about Trump, everybody assumes Trump's support is all conservative. It's not. He draws from liberal Republicans. He draws from moderate Republicans. He draws from conservative Republicans. Mainly, he draws from angry Republicans of every stripe. So are those people going to go to someone like Ted Cruz if Trump is not in the race? I don't think so. I think they're going to scatter to the four winds. A lot of them might go to him, but not enough to make his strategy sensible.
Well, and so if Trump drops out, do we see a Pataki boom? Are we ready for a Pataki winter? Is that the season when Pataki just,
There's going to be a sudden
soars like an eagle?
It's going to be a sudden renewal of Gilmore Girls. It's going to be a Gilmore show here. Jim Gilmore is going to be the dark horse that comes back to take the race out of the hands of Ben Carson at that point.
Yeah, that was the entire point of the Iran protest.
Jeff, I would say that of all the people that you would probably block on Twitter that are Trump fans, 98% of them have Cruz also in their Twitter bio as Cruz 2016. You go to the Trump websites, they have a Trump section, they have a Cruz section. If anybody is going to pick up votes from Trump's voters, it's going to be Cruz.
Okay, but the question there is, Caleb, how representative are the people on Twitter of the actual Trump support? They're not.
100%.
We always forget. We are so small, and functionally, we are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of the actual GOP base.
No, that's just we are, but that's not who we're talking about. That's not who these people are. These people are not Twitter experts. They're not bloggers. These are just people who use social media, which is something that everyday Americans use. It's not some novel new technology that people haven't got the hang of. It's on every iPhone in the country, and it's easy to use. People use Twitter. Regular people use Twitter. People that are primary voters use Twitter.
Can we just all agree that it's really sad that there are guys out there who didn't open up Twitter accounts until they were like, Donald Trump needs my help. I better go start tweeting, N-word lover and, Senator Cornyn to help my guy.
It is terrible, the number of eggs that I've had to mute or block over the last, and they're all Trump white supremacists. But let's not go off into that tangent. But I will say, if you look at, and I wrote a post about this a couple weeks ago, if you look at the kind of the RCP graph of support, you look at where Trump's support came from. Trump's support went up, coinciding exactly with the decimation of support from two people, Jeb Bush and Scott Walker. That's essentially who he's drawing his support from. As Trump has gone up, Cruz has actually gone up slightly. So I think I share Jeff's concern that Cruz's strategy here, that he's automatically going to pick up these Trump voters, is based on an incorrect assumption about what characterizes most of the Trump support, beside what you see on Twitter. But we'll see in the end if Trump actually falters. Last Republican question, then we got to move on to the Democrat side. We're already halfway into the show. Goes to Donald Trump, a.k.a. Bill Morris. Mr. Trump, I would like for you, if you can, just break down, if you will, did you see the scene earlier this week from the Mike Huckabee rally with Kim Davis with Ted Cruz, which was, I think, the most painful scene of the entire campaign season thus far. Are you familiar with that, or should I go to Caleb with this particular question? Hello, Donald. Hello, Bill. No. Caleb, break it down for us.
Oh,
I know
sorry,
you
I
saw
wasn't paying attention. What was the question?
So the Kim Davis event where Mike Huckabee was there and Ted Cruz tried to take the stage and was blocked from doing so. Did you see that happen?
Blocked by who? Huckabee?
Blocked by
Did
Huckabee
Huckabee
staffers.
put weight back on and just prevent him from ascending the steps?
Huckabee staffers physically prevented Ted Cruz from taking the stage.
If Ted Cruz can't stand up to Huckabee staffers, who have to be like, very genuine, nice Bible thumpers, then I think his insistence that he's the guy who will make Vladimir Putin back down is a lie and should crush his candidacy.
Having met Huckabee staffers, I say that that's not exactly true with respect to his staff.
Oh, but, yeah, no, he had all those former staffers involved in that Waco shooting between the biker gangs a couple weeks ago, right? That's the Huckabee security team.
Exactly.
That's intimidating.
Yeah, Caleb, what do you think? Has anybody had a rougher week this week, PR-wise, than Ted Cruz after that event and kind of being seen publicly following Donald Trump around?
Yeah, no, I think it was a pretty bad week for him. I mean, definitely for people that like him, it was a disappointing week. That whole scene outside as Kim Davis is walking out and he comes following the group out there, and that kid, essentially a kid, just steps in front of him and just keeps stepping in front of him. It looked like they were dancing together. It was really awful. And so he finally gives up and doesn't go out there. And then later, Huckabee goes on and explains on TV, he's like, we don't know why he was there. We don't know. He just kind of showed up. Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah, and on the one hand, you feel really bad for him because what he's supposed to do is start a fist fight with a Huckabee staffer. I mean, that's not news that you want to be in. But on the other hand, it definitely looked terrible.
It's
and
that Bill wants to be in.
Right, exactly. All right. So let's go on to the Democratic side. Sticking with 2016, we'll spend a little less time on the Democrats than we did on the Republicans. And we're still having some controversy about the debate schedule with the Democrats. We're going to go back to Vincent for the first question here. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is basically standing pat saying, look, we're only going to have six debates. I don't care what happens. I don't care how many people get in. We're only going to have 6 debates. What, at this point, is the benefit to the Democrats of basically standing with and towing this line? I mean, every debate that you have is free ratings and free advertising for all of your candidates. Why is she so insistent that she's going to stick with the schedule that they already have?
Well, there is sort of the behind-the-scenes kind of, conspiracy theory that's certainly in my head, that the Hillary campaign has a lot to do with this. Obviously, the Hillary campaign doesn't want that to be the theme, that they're trying to force the DNC's hand into limiting debates. I don't know what the intent is there. I do think Debbie is very annoyed that she even has to address this. Every time she's asked about it, now she's to the point where she's telling people there are going to be 6 debates, period. And I think she's really ticked that Martin O'Malley's out there trying to make something of this. The other thing is that there is some notion in the Democratic Party that Bernie Sanders is, if he becomes super popular, either courtesy of these debates or whatever, I mean, granted, he's becoming super popular whether they like it or not, he could define what the Democratic Party is by constantly referring to himself as a democratic socialist, and that he's going to like sort of draw the party way to the left, that the idea is that this Democratic Party has nothing to do with middle of the road mainstream America. And that's another thing they want to avoid. I mean, honestly, if I'm going to look forward to these debates, the one thing I'm going to predict is that Bernie Sanders is going to come away looking impressive to a lot of Democrats. They're going to watch these things and go, whoa, why am I supporting Hillary? I kind of like this Bernie guy.
Which I think the people who are in charge of the DNC is an undesirable result. What do you make, Vincent, sticking with you, what do you make out of the fact that a couple of people who basically report directly to Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the DNC are now saying they think that there should be more debates? Do you think this is evidence of an active rift within the DNC? Of course, and with Obama being a lame duck, he's not as much in control of who the personnel in the DNC are anymore, especially with the kind of assumption that Hillary's people are going to be moving in.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me, especially because Debbie Wasserman Schultz is sort of the face of the rift in the Democratic Party in some ways. The idea that the Republican Party is the only party with like these intra-party battles is just false. I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been the representation of that for several years now. Obama tried to get her out. I mean, they tried to get rid of Debbie, and they were unsuccessful because she got out in front of that by citing a bunch of things, including that this may have been anti-Jewish sentiment, that trying to get rid of her. So it was like this just crazy debate that flared up and disappeared, and it continues to exist in the Democratic Party. I mean, there really is a battle going on behind the scenes, whether it's on that side where politicians are fighting over who's running the Democratic Party, and all the way to the donor side where you had an active coup to throw out like David Brock from these various groups that he's involved with. So there's some real fights going on right now, and they're only going to get worse as it looks like Hillary's in disarray. So the more Hillary doesn't seem like she's got control of the ship, the more likely it is you're going to see Democratic defections and a lot of arguing that spills out into public.
So Ryan, let me go to you next. If you will recall, back in the period, between 2004 and 2008, maybe all the way up to 2010, Democrats essentially were defined by basically one thing above all other things, and that was being anti-war. Basically, the anti-war movement was the face of the Democratic Party. That movement has essentially been quieted or shunted aside in favor of things like economic inequality, Black Lives Matter, all the other things that Democrats want to talk about now. Does the Hillary candidacy, with the fact that she's known to be kind of a hawkish Democrat, and even more so since she became Secretary of State, she's got her fingerprints all over the incursion in Libya and Egypt and a bunch of other actions the Obama administration has taken, does the presence of the Hillary campaign threaten to bring the anti-war movement back into, I guess, an active political force within the Democratic Party? And if so, is that something that can challenge Hillary?
I tend to think not. I mean, on the one hand, it did hurt her in 2008, but I think that the party, for better or worse, has forgiven her, for lack of a better word, and I really think what you're looking at right now with Hillary barely leading in some polls is she's trying to play this prevent defense with, especially with these lack of debates. And so I think if we start to see more polls where Bernie's, eclipsing her, she's probably going to regret taking behind-the-scenes play and limiting the number of debates, because she's going to want to get out there and say, look, here's how I can differentiate myself from this 74-year-old old white guy with, stringy hair. But, I mean, I really just don't think foreign policy is going to be the dividing factor for the Democrats. I mean, I think the Black Lives Matter, I think that how do the Democrats react to that? How do they address some of the issues there? Will any of them ever get to disrupt a Hillary event? I mean, those are kind of the pressing issues on the left, environmental concerns as well. But I don't see Hillary's past record on foreign policy playing as big of an impact this time around, to be honest.
All right, Caleb, we're going to go to you. And, one of the things that we have kind of kicked around a lot on this show over the weeks is the idea that if things continue to devolve and the slow-rolling Hillary email-gate disaster continues to take its toll on her campaign, the Democrats, I think, really do not want Bernie Sanders as their nominee. And the idea is that somebody else who is not currently in the field is going to ride into the rescue. So I'm just going to ask you to rate and give some explanation for your rating, most likely to least likely. Who do you think, if someone jumps into the Democratic field, will be that person? And so put in order, maybe Joe Biden, Al Gore, John Kerry, and Elizabeth Warren. Those four people, put them in order. Okay?
Starting with Gore, I give him a 10 for being for wanting to jump in, a 10 for being able to be a total news grabber away from Donald Trump, a 10 for his second chakra, and a 5 that anybody actually wants to vote for him.
All right.
Elizabeth Warren gets a 10 for people that want to vote for her, a 5 for her personality, a 3 for wanting to jump in, and a 1 for being, I think, even older than Hillary.
So what about Biden, and
Biden is always the X factor. If Biden jumps in, I think it's just because people sort of want to give him a participation trophy. So they, oh, good for you, man. Good. I don't think it's going to be anything serious. I don't think we're going to be looking at a President Biden or even a nominee Biden at any point in the future of the United States. And if we are, maybe moving somewhere.
What about Kerry?
John Kerry's a joke. I don't think even the Democrats are going to take him seriously. He's a complete disaster. He's an idiot. He comes tromping off the plane, swinging his cane umbrella like he's Churchill. He's got sycophants on MSNBC talking about him like he's striding the earth like a mighty titan. Nobody buys his shtick. The only reason he's anybody is because President Obama is the only sucker who believes in him.
So would you say that you think that the most likely to actually enter the race, regardless of whether they succeed or not, would be Al Gore? Am I understanding you correctly?
Well, no, I mean, I think that the actions of Democrats are totally unpredictable, but I will pick Gore.
All right. So,
see,
Jeff,
I think Ryan was off base when he used a football metaphor before, because this being America, we should talk about America's game. Hillary Clinton is the Washington Nationals. She is the inevitable juggernaut who just can't stop blowing it time and time and time again, only to be kneecapped and totally demolished, swept 2 times in a row, losing 8 of the past 9 games against the Mets, who are now guaranteed to make the playoffs because of brilliant performances by Jacob deGrom. Here's the difference. The Democrats do not have a Yoenis Cespedes in their field to carry and revive them and replace the Nats and put a legitimate person up for contention against the St. Louis Cardinals, who, let's be honest, are the Donald Trumps of the National League. They're hugely overrated. They have tremendous numbers at the moment, but I don't think they're going to go all the way to the World Series because we have Yoenis Cespedes. And who's Yoenis Cespedes? It's, oh gosh, I don't know. Also Donald Trump?
Listen, Bill, thank you very much for your opinions, but please stick it in Yoenis.
I'll mute myself.
So here we go with Jeff to an actual political question now that we've had the obligatory Mets reference, and after the lifetime of misery and despair that Bill signed up for becoming a Mets fan, he's entitled to crow a little bit for the 1 year that they have some success. So Jeff, if you look at Bernie Sanders and what he represents in terms of his appeal as a candidate, I think that, and there was a great article today, and I forget who wrote it, that he does present a legitimate candidate or a legitimate challenge to Hillary for one reason, and that is that Hillary, if you listen to her talks and talks and talks and says nothing. The Democrats, I think, are as thirsty for an ideas person or someone who stands up for what they believe in as the Republicans are. And if you listen to a Bernie speech, it is a relentless 45-minute to an hour-long, surprisingly energetic dissertation on all of the hot-button actual issues that Democrats and liberals love. Is that going to be enough? That kind of relentless focus on this is liberalism, this is what I believe in, this is what I challenge, going to be enough to unseat someone who the Democrats are frankly unhappy with? I mean, especially if we're looking at right now, if the Iowa caucuses were held Tuesday and New Hampshire 10 days after that, he might win them both. You think that's going to be enough to carry into the momentum in the end?
No. And now let's talk more about the New York Mets, which I think are an absolute shit team. And, Jacob deGrom is a Tommy John surgery waiting to happen. Matt Harvey doesn't even want to play for the Mets. He's shutting himself down after the season because he just realizes it's a garbage franchise and he can't wait to go play for the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Nationals. And Yoenis Cespedes is basically a free agent already. He's counting the stacks of money in his head premeditatively. And I can understand, because who would want to play for a shithole like, the Queens and the New York Yankees? I certainly wouldn't. I would rather be caught dead in hell at the ninth circle than be a Mets fan. Now, that said, Bernie is not going to overtake Hillary Clinton. the truth of the matter is that if there's anything, if for whatever reason Hillary Clinton loses both Iowa and New Hampshire to Bernie Sanders, what is going to happen, to continue our baseball analogies, is not going to be Bernie Sanders winning the game. It's going to be a call to the bullpen. And the call to the bullpen will probably be Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren or perhaps some fusion thereon too. Sanders is whites
Yeah,
only.
that was a disturbing image.
Please not.
I know.
Let's never again reference.
Yes. I understand.
Wait.
But
A call to the
Sanders
bullpen and Drew Storen, or a call to the Mets bullpen and Tyler Clippard?
Yeah, we had drilled a home run off of Tyler Clippard last night, you son of a bitch. But I will point
lost
out
the game.
God, okay. But anyway, the point is Bernie Sanders will never be the Democratic nominee for president. It will not happen. Just as Jesse Jackson was not going to win in 1988. Bill Bradley was not going to win in 2000. John Edwards was not winning in 2004. And, John Edwards, again, was not going to, or Howard Dean was not winning in 2004. These people have very limited franchises. They cannot expand beyond them. They appeal primarily to white liberals, which are a vanishingly shrinking part of the Democratic coalition. If they can't expand beyond them, they have no hopes of growing. That is that, and that is all. So Hillary will plod her way most likely to the nomination, and will leave her very weakened for the general, in my opinion.
Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the Iran deal. Let's talk about some actual news that's going on in the world, and we're going to go to Bill first. He's next in the rotation, I believe. There was an article today, and I think that it raised an interesting point. And everyone is focusing with respect to the Iran deal on the nuclear weapons issue, and of course there's a reason for that. Nuclear weapons, tend to be news-grabbing things. But the article made the case that really, if you look at the Iran deal, the thing that we ought to be focusing on is giving the Iranians $100 billion in cash to essentially distribute around to various groups in the Middle East, which might destabilize the whole region. Do you think that is a correct assessment, that that's as big a deal or bigger of a deal than the nuclear weapons issue, or should we stick with the nukes in terms of our focus?
Well, and I think Republicans have done a good job of drawing attention to this aspect of the Iran deal over the, this is something that's in the here and now, and I think that's why you're seeing the polling so low on the Iran deal. It's not just nuclear weapons. It's the fact that we're giving a regime $100 billion that is definitely going to kill us with it. And this is actually one of the problems with Senator Cotton's response to this. When he sent the letter, and when Tom Cotton sent the letter and said, hey, we just want to let you know that anyone can eventually repeal this deal and put the sanctions back in place and negotiate better than John Kerry has, it's worth pointing out that, yes, that's true 2 years from now, and we can do more to hinder them in the future, but the $100 billion is the here and now. And that is going to be a problem that, for Democrats, that they're going to have to deal with for a long time.
So, Vincent, John Boehner, in his inimitable style, has responded to basically the passage of the Iran deal by once again threatening a lawsuit, which I don't know if this is the 7th or 8th lawsuit that the House Republicans have filed about various things. Without giving away, well, I will give away my own opinion of this, is it's a terrible, frickin' stupid, pointless tactic that the House Republicans always want to sue over things instead of actually standing their ground and fighting over things on must-pass bills. What do you think, though? I mean, do you agree with that, or do you think there's something to Boehner's kind of standard, let's go to the courts and let them help us out and try to stop what Obama's trying to do here?
I'd say, I mean, if you believe very strongly in this, that it needs to be destroyed any way possible, I guess, whatever recourse you have to do that, it probably needs to be in bounds. Especially, when, like every battle they've had with Obama, if they believe this is the hill to die on, then yeah, shut down the government. Sue whoever you have to make this work. I mean, if that's the number one goal, then go for it. One thing though is let's just rewind this. The Republicans were kind of complicit in this, though. I mean, the fact is they gave Obama the authority to actually make this deal in the first place. So if we're basically playing Monday morning quarterback and going, hey, what can the Republicans do to fix this horrible mess that they were complicit in getting the country into in the first place? They need to, I don't know. I mean, nobody's going to take responsibility for this, but the reason this is not a treaty and it's a deal is because Republicans went along with thinking that this would work out in their favor, and it clearly hasn't.
Well, obviously Bob Corker has taken. I mean, look, he put his name on the bill, and 99. What was it? 99-1 that bill passed. I mean, so yeah. I mean, I totally agree they have to own that, which I think is I guess part of the debacle of Boehner's.
Leon, I'm sorry. I hate to jump in here, but I have to say.
You don't.
No, okay, I love to jump in because I am an attention whore. But no, seriously, I disagree very strongly with Vince. And this is one of these things that, as a constitutional lawyer and as a person who has appellate experience, it bothers me that people think that, oh, there's something that the Republicans could have done about this. This treaty literally was a foreordained fact at the minute Barack Obama got reelected in November of 2012. It was done then. For the simple reason that this is not a treaty. This is an executive agreement. There is no way that you can make it a treaty. I don't want to get into all of the legal issues because they will bore people to death, but the fact of the matter is that if you don't bind Congress, if you don't force the United States to adhere to any new laws, it is not a treaty.
Hold on. He doesn't get the right. Hold on, though. But the point, Jeff, is he doesn't get the right to make that negotiation without Congress undoing their duly enacted sanctions. I mean, he does not have the right.
No. Leon, you are absolutely 100% wrong as a matter of law because Congress actually 3 times in 1996, 1997, 2007 passed laws specifically stipulating that the executive has the unilateral power to undo sanctions, to waive sanctions for any, literally, it doesn't actually say this statutorily, but it does, any fucking reason. They don't have to go to Congress. They give them that Congress. But the Corker-Cardin bill, and you can go back, we've discussed this on BATF before, you can go back, right, we've had this. What the Corker-Cardin bill actually did is pulled some of that power back and said, no, you have to reach a certain vote threshold before that will now be allowed anymore. But if the Corker-Cardin bill had never passed, it would have been the old law that was previously on the books that would have let the president do anything he wanted without any reason or need to submit it to Congress. And is that horrible? Is that horribly irresponsible that the president could do such a terrible thing and basically help give Iran a nuke without having to get any congressional approval? Yes, it is. But it is also the Constitution. It is also the law. It is a grotesquerie. But unless you're just going to toss out the Constitution and say, fuck this, let's have a coup, let's do it a new way, you have to adhere to the way the structure of the law was. We did not predict somebody as bloody-mindedly stupid, maybe even iniquitous as Obama. And that is the tragedy of the Iran.
I do like that the White House came out with a statement yesterday celebrating the congressional vote, the filibuster. They were like, wow, thank you, Congress, for giving us this whole
42 people have spoken. Yes, it's the majority of the Senate. Yeah, they're awful people, and they're disingenuous in the extreme. We know this. We grant this. But I am just saying, as a matter of legality, it is just so misunderstood on our and I blame actually in a large part the GOP establishment. This is one of these things that we ran on in 2014, and we overpromised. We said we could stop this deal, and that was a lie. That was frankly a lie. We could never have seriously stopped this deal unless we could have mustered 67 votes in the Senate, which was always a long shot. Once that was gone, it was gone.
John Kerry's got a Nobel Prize to win, so we can't really get in the way of that.
So let's go to Caleb here, and it appears, that the actual passage of the bill, and it's not really even a bill, but Obama's going to be allowed to do essentially what he wants to do. The Congress is not going to be able to stop him. So he's gotten what he's wanted, but one of the things that's unquestionably true is that as this debate has gone on, the public support for this is cratered. The latest polls show that only 21% of the people in America favor the deal. A much larger percent, I think 59%, oppose it. It's only even a dead even split, 42-42 among Democrats. And this is their own guy basically pushing the deal. you wouldn't have gotten me to predict that the Democrats would be opposed to, Barack Obama, having sex with a live male goat on television, if that's what he said he wanted to do. But lo and behold, we have something that they actually are not in favor of Barack Obama doing. So I guess the question is, as we've kind of talked about, there are things that people oppose but yet don't really care about when it comes time to cast their ballot. Is this Iran deal, which Hillary Clinton has now basically signed on to and hardly endorsed, going to cost the Democrats anything politically when they go to the ballot box in 2016?
Yes, it will, but appreciably, that's another question. I think that there's too much time that's going to pass and too many other things. They're especially skilled at the Democrats at changing what it is that you're worried about in the last few weeks before the election. I think people are going to be way more concerned about Republicans want to tear apart Obamacare and make sure that nobody has insurance and a bunch of other crap. So, yeah, I mean, it'll hurt them now and possibly in the long run, but appreciably, I don't think it's going to decide or swing an election.
All right, let's move on and hit our final topic of the night, and we're going to touch on this one just very briefly. We're going to continue. We're going to talk a little bit, and we spent a lot of time on this last week in terms of the European refugee crisis. And, I think last week we were all basically in horror show mode after having seen kind of the terrible images of the boy who drowned off the coast of Turkey there. And now we've entered kind of, I guess, the policy debate portion of the program where we talk about, how many refugees can we take? What are going to be the conditions on that? What should we realistically expect other countries to take, and so on and so forth. And so we're going to go to Ryan here. And what do you think the right message for GOP presidential candidates to strike here in terms of the refugee crisis is? What do you think the right notes that these candidates should be hitting?
That is a very good question. I think it is responsible to say, and I don't know the details of all of this, but I think it's responsible to say that we have to know who's coming here and what kind of threat, in theory, that they would pose to us. But I think it's important to say that, this is a conflict in a way that has exacerbated itself because of our policy in the Middle East. So I think that's one thing that every candidate should note, is that we are not doing our job and our responsibility to those in the Middle East, and therefore they are fleeing their country. And that's because we have an incoherent policy with regards to Syria, Iraq, and the Islamic State at large. But I kind of like putting it on the Europeans. They have been so lackluster in their response to so many global crises that I shrug it off in a way. I don't think that's a good position for the presidential candidates, and I don't think a lot of Americans have really thought about, what it would all entail. What happens when the people get here? Are they going back? Are we going to resettle them in another country? Is this, a transitional opportunity? So I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer, but I do think it has to start with the fact that our policy in the Middle East is extremely disoriented and unfocused and obviously not working.
So, Bill, you had what I thought was a great and compelling story about a guy who was a former Marine interpreter at the Washington Free Beacon, and I'm just going to give you some time here to talk a little bit about your post and that you wrote, and tell us about this guy whose name I can't pronounce, Sami Kazakhani.
Oh, appreciate it. So Sami Kazakhani was a Marine interpreter who was absolutely beloved by his team. He was very effective. He worked 18-hour days out in the field as an interpreter for the Marines, completely unarmed. Only man in the room. That when Marines sit there and go and meet with village elders who are Taliban sympathizers, they're sitting there with an unarmed interpreter. And this guy got hung out to dry by the State Department. The State Department has promised safe haven to our interpreters, but they never actually deliver on the visas to bring them to the United States. So a ton of these people have been murdered while they're waiting on their visa papers to get out of the country. you have to keep in mind, these guys can't wear masks like the people who, like the Mexican special police forces that take down cartel members. They get to wear masks. They get to carry guns. These guys, their livelihood is their mouth, and their faces are immediately photographed clandestinely. Everyone takes note of them. They're distributed throughout the entire country, and they're targeted for assassination. And this guy's own father-in-law, who was Mujahideen, put a price on his head and leaked out to everybody that he was working with the Americans and should be beheaded. So he had to take his wife and pay some smugglers and get into Greece. So this is a guy who the Marines who worked with him said saved their lives, and he doesn't get United States citizenship. He doesn't get a visa. He has to hop in a smuggler's boat. He saw a boat flip over on his way over the day that, the night when that little Syrian toddler drowned. Everyone thinks that this is Syria, and they think they can wash their hands of what's going on over there because, we didn't start the Syrian civil war. But there are Afghanis that we have completely abandoned to the mercy of the Taliban, who aren't very famous for mercy. And they are getting murdered every day. Their applications to come to the United States, they have done more for the U.S. than anyone sitting on this panel. And we are keeping them in no man's land. We're keeping them on death row. And they are killing themselves. At least three interpreters from Afghanistan and Iraq have gone missing while trying to cross from Turkey to Greece across the sea. So his name is Sami Kazakani. The Marines who served with him are now doing a crowdfunding campaign because he only has 600 euros to his name to try to help cover his expenses for him and his 10-month-old daughter, who on top of teething is going days without eating. So anybody watching the show can do to help. The Free Beacon, I linked to it in the story. The story is called One Translator Story. Check it out. 3,000 words is going to take you a while, but if you don't have time to read 3,000 words, the first 600 words have the link to the crowdfunding campaign. Yeah. And anything you chip in would, go a very long way to helping
Yes, can I ask a
family
question?
stay alive.
I have a couple questions. First of all, I think you noted this is not the first time this has happened. This has actually been going on for a few years now. The interpreters are being abandoned. But second of all, I think that the key questions that people have and that rarely get answered is what is stopping it, and how do you get it to stop stopping it? Who do you contact? What do you change? What happens to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? What's preventing him from getting citizenship, and how do you change that? That's the question.
Okay, so here's the thing that's happening is it's up to the State Department to issue them. The State Department's promised 4,000 of them to be issued by 2017. They've only issued 2,500. They slow walk all of these things. I talked to one former interpreter who applied for the special visa. He had been an interpreter for the United States in Afghanistan since 2001. This dude signed up right away. He worked for an anti-corruption network. He was a trained radiologist. So obviously he's not coming on the dole. Took him 13 years to get this visa. 3-year application process, spent $4,400 to do all the medical checkups. What's stopping them is State Department bureaucracy, because the State Department, I guess one thing they could be commended for is that no one wants to import the Afghani who eventually becomes a terrorist, which would be a valid point.
Yeah, but look,
except they could go through Mexico, and that's where the terrorists are going to go.
And I was in military intelligence. It doesn't take 13 years to figure out if somebody's going to be that next guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we give out top secret clearances every day, above top secret clearances every day, that the clearing process is 8 months or less. So it doesn't take that long.
Caleb, I know some of the people who process these sorts of things, and I will tell you that one of the other issues that they talk about is not just the point that Bill raises, which is one of the real issues, that like you don't want to be the guy who approved the visa application of the man who blew up another building. But the other one is that when you set a hard cap on visas that are going to be allowed for these people, say 4,000, then suddenly every single next one that you approve becomes super important because there are a limited number of them that you are allowed to hand out. And so you slow walk every last damn one of them to make sure, oh, well, this one has to be cleared through these 4,000 different hurdles, and then you feed them into the system. And as we all know, the DC bureaucracy will just chew you out forever. But I think that the real tragedy, the mistake that could have prevented this, is setting a hard cap on we're only going to issue X number of visas. If they had said we're going to issue an unlimited number of visas for those who are translators and whom prove themselves, said it.
Okay, but what I'm getting at
it
here
would not have happened this way.
We get people that are being authorized for citizenship at basically the president's whim already.
The president has limited attention, man. He doesn't.
The president. See, think about it this way: the president just said he's going to take in 10,000 Syrians.
Right.
Only Syrians. We have hundreds of Afghan interpreters and Iraqi interpreters sitting in refugee camps scattered across Europe right now.
Every last
one let me
citizen first.
Let me chip in something here that's relevant. This is actually from my work experience. People all the time, they know I'm a lawyer, they ask me, Leon, what is it that you do? What kind of law it is that you practice? And it's always terrible and painful to explain, but I'm going to attempt it now because I think it's relevant to this particular discussion.
Everybody run!
That's right. So what I do basically boiled down to the very simple essentials is that Congress in their infinite wisdom decided back in 2007 or so that there was rampant waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicare system. They authorized these companies to go and basically take back what they consider to be overpayments. Their mistake was they said, we'll pay you on commission. We'll pay you a flat commission, and you get to keep the money all the way through the appeals process. So you can predict what happened. Hundreds of thousands of cases were declared as takebacks. My job is to go and try to get that money back on behalf of the hospitals. Here's the problem. Within HHS, which is the executive branch agency that handles this, there are something like 137 administrative law judges. The caseload that they have now, just now, without any new cases, is like 40 years long. It's 40 years long. Like if they handle 8 cases a day, each one of them for the rest of their lives, that's 40 years. And they're supposed to hear these within like 3 months, now according to the statute. Now, that kind of thing is rampant all throughout the federal bureaucracy. It applies to these people. Just processing 4,000 applications, even if you were rubber stamping all of them, would take forever. And I think it's also what Donald Trump doesn't understand because he's never worked in the public sector. This is actually a liability for him. You can't just deport 11 million people summarily. All those people have to be given due process rights and a hearing. Giving 11 million people a hearing in front of our current load of immigration judges that we have is something like a 100-year process. Most of the people, or all the people, are going to be dead before they even get their hearing. So it's a real bottleneck that exists, and I guess the answer for it, if you say, well, gosh, something ought to be done, well, we got to be prepared. The answer for that, for us conservative Republicans, is to spend a shitload more money on this stuff. Right. And I don't know that that's the answer that we want to have here. Other than
there are shortcuts.
That's why I said
it. Shortcuts. There are shortcuts through bureaucracy, particularly where the military is concerned. There's no.
Sure. If you know somebody, you gotta know somebody. It's
sure, but you know who doesn't have any strings to pull? It's some pudnut illegal immigrant who is nobody and doesn't even have legal status here. They have no shortcuts through the bureaucracy.
Right,
and
but
they're the ones who are going to take 100 years to get through.
The interpreters and their Marine friends do have shortcuts, and the people who are in positions of authority, who are congressmen and senators, who go out on the campaign trail and lament the plight of these men, they have shortcuts that they could take. So the question is, if we know a particular guy,
there's so much hypocrisy on the politician side.
I mean,
of this.
Rick Perry just told the story about how there was a dog, a combat dog, wanted to be returned to the family of the Marine who fell in battle with his dog, and there was all this paperwork and everything, and Rick Perry made a few calls, cut through all that, and got the dog back in like a week. It can be done.
You know what? Dogs are terrible.
Well,
Tell me they buried him with it. Like, they got the dog so they could bury it alive with the guy? Is that what happened?
No. The dog survived. The Marine was killed.
But by the way, that's one of the
who gives
reasons
a shit
why.
about the dog? It's a dog.
Well, the family wanted the dog.
Jesus, Bill.
It was
God.
a connection
Dogs
to
are
their
terrible.
dead son.
All right, so thank you, Donald Trump. That's not Bill. That's Donald Trump wearing that hat.
Hey,
He's the
Vince
one who
hasn't
said that
spoken
about
in a
the
while.
dogs.
I asked Vince something ridiculous.
Well, we're out of time, actually. We're about to close up for the night. So,
Vince, say something. Tell him disrespect.
Say something
like that.
ridiculous, Vince.
Fuck the police.
what,
I don't know. What do you want me to say?
Wait. Can I rap
That's
the
the first-
entire NWA song? Because I actually do know it, and I'm so white that it would be the most embarrassing thing that ever happened here.
Oh, you're white? Joey
Vince
Behar?
Williams.
You're white? Oh,
I'm
I
on
had
the
no
other
idea.
color, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. Fuck that shit. Because I ain't the one for some punk motherfucker with a badge and a gun to be beaten on and thrown in jail. We can go toe-to-toe in the middle of a cell.
That's boy, I'm having
I just feel sad now.
exactly as good as Chris
You know what's
Pratt.
hilarious? In order to address Black Lives Matter, that's going to be in the Democratic Party platform in a couple months.
All right. Guys, we're out of time. We need to close it up. We're actually 10 minutes over time. I want to thank everybody for being with us. I'm going to let my panelists go, those of us who have to go to sleep. I want to say thanks to my regular panelists who decided to show up tonight, even on NFL premiere night. Jeff Blehar of the Ace and Spades Decision Desk and F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Caleb Howe, for filling in. Thank you, Ryan Moy and Vincent Coglianese, our guest panelists. Glad you guys could be here. Thanks, Aaron Gardner, for producing. Great show tonight. Seeing great comments about it on Twitter already. Thanks, you guys, the audience, for being with us, and we hope that you'll be with us again next week on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends.
Love you.